And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. Just a regular old Wednesday. Now, I didn't realize, in looking at the scheduling this week, that I would be up against some pretty stiff competition. And know that I am cognizant of the fact that there is an inauguration about to get started. I'm hoping that we'll be kind of ending right as those are that's getting started. I'll understand if some of you kind of drop out of the session towards the end. But I do have a lot of great questions that have come in today for this Ask Me Anything session. And I want to get to those questions and as many of them as I can and work my way through them. So we're just going to dive right into your questions. And our first question comes to us from Jamie Kovacs in Santa Ana. And Jamie says, business card shapes, better to have regular size ones that will get tossed in the trash, or a square, almost postcard one with an image of the artist that will go on their fridge. Jamie, it sounds to me like you maybe have a little bit of an opinion already about which one of these would be more effective. And I'm not going to disagree with you. I will say that our business cards at the gallery are pretty traditional sized. Most of the time, though, we are attaching those cards to something else that maybe we're giving out, a copy of our gallery catalog, an artist's biography. And so we feel like it kind of has a little bit more of a presence than just the card on its own. For an artist, I will say that in my experience, you don't need to spend too much time thinking about business cards. Put one together. It's good to have one if you're participating in shows and festivals. I will say, and you've seen me write blog posts about this, that I want you to be very careful about not using your business card as some kind of excuse not to get a client's or gallery owner's contact information. And I think you have to be really careful about that. There's a real temptation when you're talking to a client about your artwork or visiting a gallery to kind of use the card as your exit strategy. Here's my contact information. Here's my website. Hand them the card and then hope for the best. When we all know that if someone who's expressed interest in your artwork, the only thing that's happened is they've received a business card, the likelihood that we're going to see a sale result from that interaction has decreased pretty dramatically. And so, again, it's okay to have a business card, but your strategy should always be to get contact information. Let me email you an image of this piece of artwork that we're looking at. Let me send you some biographical information. What's your email address? And I will tell you that and if I had one here, if I would have been a little more prepared, I would have had one that I could show you. But we are far more reliant on our contact card. That is the card that our clients fill out to give us their address, email, telephone number. That is a far, far more powerful tool than a business card or a brochure. And so you want to default towards that. Now, having said that, having a business card with an image of artwork on it that's memorable, why not do both? Have that card and strive to get the contact information, but just make it a habit to always get contact information whenever that is humanly possible. Okay, I've got a question from Lori Reed, and Lori, I think I saw you here in the session. So maybe rather than me reading your question, if I can have you unmute yourself and come in with the question. You have a question about print pricing and enlargements, and maybe we can just talk about that a little bit instead of me reading and then answering.
Okay. I do mixed media work, and
we saw your work here in one of the previous critique sessions.
Yeah.
And those of you, I'll just give you a reminder that it is the strips collage, multimedia images that are pieced together to create landscapes. Very intricate, very, as we discussed, time consuming. And so it's only natural that you might think about creating some reproductions of your work.
Yes. So I recently did some for Caterpillar to put in a lobby of one of their buildings. And then I've had a request online of, oh, I see that piece I was interested in. You enlarged it. How big can that go? So I've got a conversation going now about another reproduction and just was unsure of. I've got a fixed cost of a $55 scan of the art and then whatever size its output. I know that cost to me, but what should I add on for the use of the art to make some profit for me, make it affordable for the client, but not be as pricey, I guess, as the original.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And of course, what you're describing is definitely the appeal of being able to do reproduction. It allows you to expand the potential market for your work by reaching out to an audience that either can't afford maybe an original work, or maybe it's going into a location where an expensive original would not be appropriate. And so it just gives you some flexibility to be able to reproduce, scale up work, and in some ways, really capitalize on your intellectual property that you've created in your imagery, and really be able to scale up your sales process. And so, absolutely makes a lot of sense. And what you're describing, I think, is well. Let me put it this way: I get a lot of questions about this, and I have to admit right up front, I actually don't do a lot in the reproduction market. It's only been over the last couple of years that I brought in a few artists who are doing reproductions in some way, but even those are not traditional giclées or prints in the way that we might think of them. So my experience to a certain extent is a little bit secondhand, but there are a couple of things that I've observed and a couple of kind of common questions that I get. And one is, okay, I've got my original, I'm doing a reproduction. Should the reproduction be priced at some given fixed percentage of the price of the original? Is there some ratio that I could use from my originals to the reproductions to come up with the retail price? And while I suppose that you probably could calculate that out at the end, I don't think that that's necessarily an effective place to start the process of pricing your work. And then there's the other scenario, which you're describing, Lori, which is kind of taking your fixed costs, your scans, your printing, shipping, and then trying to decide if you can add something on top of that. And again, we need to do that to make sure that you do have a profit margin on these pieces. But I would suggest that a better place to start this process is the same place I would start the process if you were trying to come up with a pricing formula for your original work, and that is market research. I am a big proponent of market research. I spend a lot of time visiting other galleries, gallery websites, artist websites, and I'm looking at marketing efforts and just everything I can learn about my competitors and what's going on in the marketplace and the industry is valuable information to me. And especially when it comes to pricing and price points, it's good to kind of have an awareness of what's going on out there. And so, for an artist who's trying to come up with their original formula for pricing their original artwork, my suggestion is, well, how are your competitors pricing? Let's find out what that range is and put the prices for your original somewhere in that ballpark. And likewise, when it comes to reproductions, I would do exactly the same thing. I would compile a list of at least 10 artists who are producing reproductions of their artwork. I would look at the range of price points there and try and see if you can reverse engineer what their pricing formula is, and use that as a starting point for figuring out the pricing for your reproductions. And then go back in and just make sure, okay, here's how my competitors are pricing. Now, can I make a profit when I consider my fixed expenses? And how does this fit in with my originals? Does the pricing make sense? I obviously wouldn't want my reproductions to be priced really close to my originals. That would pose some problems. And likewise, I wouldn't want them priced so low that I just can't generate a profit on it. And so it's kind of it's a balancing act and a process. And then once you've come up with that original, or excuse me, once you've come up with that approach to pricing, kind of have a sense of where the range is, and you feel comfortable that you're going to be profitable, and you put it out into the marketplace, and you start selling the work, then the market kind of takes over. And as demand starts to increase and sales pick up, you'll feel more confident in bumping your prices up. And the constant tension there is we want to raise our prices to the maximum level we can achieve without damaging our sales. And you'll see that that's just kind of a give and take that you go into. And so that would be my suggestion, Lori, is just dive in and look at some other artists who are doing similarly scaled reproductions of their work, and start there and see how that pricing would work with yours.
Okay, thank you.
And you also had a suggestion for a book, The Art of Rivalry: For Friendships, Betrayals, and Breakthroughs in Modern Art. I have not read it, but I see some people nodding their heads. I'm going to add that to my to-read list, and we'll get back and have a good discussion about that at some point, Lori. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've got a question from Lisa. And by the way, now there are enough of us here, I can't see all of us. So if I start reading your question and you want to jump in and add something to it, or just give me the question, I'd love to have you do that. So and Lisa, do I have you here? Nope, maybe not. So let's see. Lisa's question is a quick one. Where can we find a listing of galleries to research and potentially approach with our artwork? Okay, good. This is a pretty straightforward one. And in fact, I would suggest two main sources that I've found to be effective, and that the artists that I'm working with in the Art Business Academy use pretty extensively in building their lists of galleries to target. The first one is Google. Figure out what markets you want to be approaching. What are some potential art markets, either in your region or maybe some areas that you would like to have representation in or traveling to frequently? And then just do a Google search, art galleries, Durango, Colorado, for example. And believe me, I can tell you, I can promise you, as a gallery owner, I want to be found when someone does that kind of Google search. We put a lot of effort into making sure that collectors can find us when they're coming to Scottsdale or to Pine Top. And so you can just kind of think like a collector and say, what would an art buyer, how would they search for potential gallery listings in an area that they're going to? And I can use that same method. So Google would be a good one. Google Maps is another good way to get to that. And then there's also a website that I've been recommending for a long time. At some point, I should probably do a little bit more research and know who runs this site, how they come up with their information. It seems to be fairly up to date, but that site is called art-collecting.com. And you go to the site, and they've broken it out by state and various regions and art markets. And it seems to me that all of the major art markets are covered, and a lot of what I would consider to be kind of maybe even second tier art markets, not necessarily destinations, but areas that do have some galleries. They do a good job of keeping a directory up to date. I looked on the website this morning. It says they've been around since 1998. With this directory, and I don't know how my gallery got into it or how they find their information, but they do seem to do that, so that can be a good resource as well, and could give you some ideas of maybe where the markets are, instead of you just randomly trying to guess. So those would be my two main suggestions. Next question is from Kevin, and let me just pop it up here. And Kevin says, can you help explain the difference between a resume and a CV, and if an artist needs to build both? Kevin, I'm going to admit maybe a little bit of ignorance, and if anybody wants to jump in and correct me on this, my understanding is that they're the same thing, that CV or curriculum vitae is a fancy way to say resume. And that no, there's not a huge difference there that I've ever been aware of, just in how maybe pretentious we are in what we call our resume. Um, but just a couple of things to think about there, and I guess what I would say is when you're thinking about the supporting documents that you might produce to help you get into galleries or to establish greater credibility with your collectors. Um, there are kind of several main documents there: your resume, biography, and artist statement. And sometimes there could be a tendency to conflate those three and put them together. That can work. I recommend having individual ones of each. And if you just to keep it very simple, your resume or CV is a list of your accomplishments. It can be broken down by date, or by categories. It can include your education, but it's just kind of a list of facts about you. Pretty dry, pretty boring, just kind of a credibility booster. Nobody spends much time poring over your resume, though. Second is your biography. That is a narrative of your story as an artist, giving a little bit of background. And this is pretty important. We use these all the time in the gallery. This is an opportunity for us to tell a bit of a story about the artists that we're representing, and a little bit of background. And people love that. They want to understand, or get a little bit of a sense of where the art is coming from and who the artist is. And that's what makes this business maybe a little more personal than other businesses, is that the buyer gets to have an opportunity to understand and maybe hopefully even get to know the creator of the artwork that they're interested in. And then your artist statement is an opportunity for you to share your philosophy about your artwork, talk a little bit about maybe the processes and procedures and technicalities of the work that you're creating. So I kind of think of the biography is the third person story of your life. The artist statement could be more the first person explanation of your work and your philosophy and what you're trying to achieve with your work. And again, and Kevin, you're in the Art Business Academy, and so we'll get to work on all three of those together and make sure that they're up to speed in what we want. Michelle asks, and this is a good question. Michelle says, what's your opinion of the current market for still life paintings? Now, we're going to hear variations of this, a couple of variations of this question today. But Michelle says, I paint food sometimes as ingredients, sometimes positioned in the context of agricultural fields or as food ready to cook, or as a meal set out. But the paintings are not just about food, but family and life and experiences. My paintings are not the pristine, perfect realism normally associated with still life, but are more impressionistic and deeply colored, sometimes a bit surreal. I'm having much difficulty making sales locally. Then she says, a rather depressed region of Western New York, and finding galleries further away. So I'm wondering if it's the subject matter. Thank you. And then Michelle includes her website if we want to go check out the work and talk about it. And Michelle, I do understand where you're coming from with this question. And it's a fairly common question that a lot of artists have, right? Is what I'm doing, whatever it might happen to be, is what I'm doing marketable? Is the subject matter appealing to a base of collectors? Can I find buyers? Can I find galleries that would be willing to represent me? And Michelle, I see I have you here in the session. So, definitely you can feel free to jump in. But I would just say that in my experience, I have traveled the nation. Really, I've traveled North America visiting galleries, and I've been in collectors' homes. And I am always fascinated to see the breadth and diversity of artwork that is being collected out there. both in terms of styles and subject matter. There's just this huge, broad, deep market for artwork out there. And in my experience, well, let me put it this way. I have never said to an artist, oh, Michelle, no, 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 no. I'm sorry, but what you're doing just cannot be sold. There's just no one out there that is ever going to be interested in what you're doing. I've not had that conversation with anyone. There have been some times when I've looked at some work and I personally have maybe internally raised an eyebrow and said, whoa, this is interesting. I can't imagine being interested in it or my audience being interested in it. But even then, I feel very confident in saying that we are in such a diverse market that no matter what the work you're creating is, you can find a marketplace for it. You can find people who are going to be just as passionate about it as you are. The question is going to be, is it a broad market with a lot of buyers and a lot of galleries that are going to be interested, which you might naturally think, oh, well, that would be a good thing. I've got a broader range of an audience to target. But there's a kind of natural balancing mechanism in the market that says that the more broadly interesting it is and the more of a market there is out there for it, the more competition you're going to have, the more artists who are going to be producing that kind of subject matter. And therefore, generally speaking, the challenge of getting your artwork out to the market is going to be roughly the same, because someone who's interested in a very niche art form is going to have less competition, but also likely going to have a little bit less of a market to get to. At the end of the day, the name of the game is just getting your artwork exposed, putting your portfolio out there, social media advertising, all of the things we talk about in these sessions should apply to all of us, regardless of the subject matter and the style that we're working in. Some of us are going to have to work maybe even a little bit harder to get the right exposure. And some of us are going to have a little bit more of a challenge, but I am absolutely convinced that with persistence of effort and being willing to maybe reach outside your local area, Michelle, as you mentioned, maybe your market isn't the strongest there, and you need to go to some markets in surrounding areas to find the right buyers. But we're very fortunate, and I'm going to be sharing in just a minute some ways that we can do that. But I'm absolutely convinced that your subject matter can be marketed and sold. Anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, I hope you're right, and thank you. And I mean, I love what I'm doing and creating, and I think I'm doing it for the right reasons, and it's important to record. So
yeah,
I keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point. We spend a lot of time here talking about the mechanics of marketing and promoting, getting your work out there. At the end of the day, though, I suspect, Michelle, if I did say that to you, oh no, Michelle, no, it just can't be done. I'm not going to convince you to stop doing what you're doing. And as you're passionate about it, that passion is going to come through, and you're going to push out and find the right market. So keep me posted. You all have my email address, and if you have concerns or questions like this, it may take me a day or two to get back to you, but hit me up with those or in these forums, and we'll keep pushing forward. Thanks for the question, Michelle.
Thank you.
A question from Casey, who is in Scottsdale, actually, and I think this is probably also pretty widely echoed, or we could all feel this same way. And Casey says, with the state of the world these days, pandemic, economy, etc., is it even worth attempting to address gallery owners? Do most galleries, especially these days, not have an already existing stable of producers they prefer? It's been a goal to affiliate with a gallery at some point, and I think my work may be approaching the point where some of my better pieces could qualify. I've been juried into some fairly difficult shows and participated in a few invitationals. But I don't want to beat a dead horse if there are other areas where my marketing time could prove more effective. Thoughts? Yeah, again, it's a great question, and one that is very natural and inevitable for us to have. I would just say, though, Casey, that I've been in the gallery business now since the early 1990s. I'm headed into 30 years here. I've had my wife and I have had Xanadu Gallery heading into 20 years. Um, and throughout that experience, it seems like an artist who wanted to, or a gallery owner who wanted to, could have had a very similar conversation to this at many different points along the way. The economy was rocky from 2008 to 2011. Our gallery's interested. There's a lot of political upheaval in 2015, 16, 17. You can always find reasons to think that maybe you're beating your head against the wall, and that artistic art market environment just is not conducive to me getting into galleries right now. I again just don't prescribe to that kind of view. I try to keep my blinders on. I do not spend a lot of time worrying about factors that are out of my control. And by the way, this same kind of wondering could lead me to a lot of doubt about, well, am I beating my head against the wall when it comes to trying to find art buyers? Are people too distracted by what's going on, or that, afraid to come out of their houses because of the pandemic, or, holding on to their funds because they're worried about the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same thing that we just can't control the environment that we are operating in. We don't have control of circumstances, and we never have and never will. And so, in my experience, it just doesn't do a lot of good dwelling on that. Certainly, we need to be aware of it. And I can tell you that over the last year, we have certainly been very conscious of how our approach to spending and investing and those kind of things has been going. But when it comes to our overall general efforts, we've redoubled our efforts to reach out to collectors and to make sales happen. And I would encourage you as an artist to be thinking the same way. I want to get into galleries. And yeah, there could be difficulties in the marketplace, but I don't have control over that. I'm just going to redouble my efforts to find galleries that would be interested in representing me. Now, I may be opening myself up here a little bit, but I will tell you that, and we have slowed down a bit in terms of bringing on artists over the last year because of the uncertainty. There's no doubt about that, which means for me that we have increased a little bit the backlog of artists that I'm talking to and exploring and thinking about and interested in. And because of my efforts to reach out to the art community in forums like this, and in traveling, I probably have a longer backlog of artists that I'm talking to and paying attention to and interested in than most galleries do. But even this year, I have managed to bring in a few new artists, and have generated some sales for those new artists. And I would just kind of extrapolate from that. Well, if those artists were able to find gallery representation this year, what is preventing me from doing the same? And again, I will just say the same thing I mentioned earlier. It's a numbers game. Let's get that portfolio out to a long list of galleries, and let them have the opportunity to see the work, Casey. And in doing so, you increase the odds that you're going to have a gallery that's excited and interested in doing it. The one last thing I'll mention here is that I've actually found that for some galleries, and I've had reports of this from artists in the Art Business Academy who've been approaching galleries recently and have gotten representation, that some galleries during turbulent times want to mix things up and want to try new artwork. They want to have an excuse to reach out to their clientele and present something new to them. And so this could actually be a good opportunity for you to be presenting your work to galleries. We just keep our effort up, and the more consistently we do that, the better the results we're going to see over time. A question from Roberto Santos in North Florida. And Roberto says, and let me pull him up here, can you define an artist's portfolio? For example, album with prints, digitally sent online, a tablet that shows to the gallery but can't be sent, website, how is the portfolio best suited today? Thanks. Yeah, so a good question. Not a question we would have had to had 15, 20 years ago. We pretty much all had an idea of what a portfolio looked like, what the format was. There was some small variation maybe, but most portfolios were physically produced images, and were handled that way. And of course, the digital revolution has kind of changed that a bit. And I will tell you that most of the portfolios I'm seeing now are digitally produced. And in fact, I'm going to pull up a portfolio here. This is a portfolio of one of the Art Business Academy members, Helen Reitz. And this is actually one of her early portfolios. She'd probably be upset at me for showing you an old one, but I think it does a good job of just giving you a good idea of the simplicity of the format that I recommend. And you can create a portfolio like this. I recommend using a presentation program. So for example, Microsoft PowerPoint, Apple Keynote, Google Slides, which is free. They give you a lot of flexibility in terms of kind of designing and moving things around, and would work better than, say, a word processing kind of program. And just keep it very simple. Images of your artwork, information about the artwork, title, size, medium, price. And that's really all you need. And the beauty of this digital format is that it allows for easy updating. Very simple for you to go in and swap out images, mark pieces sold. And then it also provides you with flexibility in terms of output format. This can be easily saved as a PDF file, which you can email, or you can load the PDF on a tablet and present that to galleries in person and then send them a copy after the fact. Or if you need to, at some point, you need to produce a physical copy, you can use an online printing service to output a physical copy. And so just, again, just keep it very simple with images of your artwork, the information, and that's going to be your foot in the door with galleries. And that format will serve you very well and give you a lot of flexibility. Laura asks, kind of a variation of our question before, can still life sell? Well, Laura's question is, can digital artwork sell? I've recently begun creating digital work with a painterly feel to them that I offer on my website as digital, original, limited edition prints. The giclée prints are shipped directly to the purchaser, unmatted and rolled in a tube. My traditionally rendered works on paper are offered matted and shipped flat. What's your take on how collectors and buyers respond to digital work? Do they regard it as fine art or not? And is it a deterrent that buyers must mat and frame the work themselves? I've had several people express enthusiastic interest in some of the work I've shown on social media, but without following through. Your thoughts. So just a couple of things I would respond to there. First and foremost, I am working with artists whose primary medium is digital. And yes, we are selling that work and collectors are buying it. And again, I don't worry too much about arguments that people are having about whether digital artwork is fine art or not. And I've said it since the very beginning of my experience in the art business, when people, not collectors, mind you, but artists, art enthusiasts, gallery owners, if they want a definition of what fine art is to me, my definition is, if I can sell it, it's fine art. And I hate to be crass about that, but in the end, that's really what it has to come down to is there an audience out there that's interested in seeing the artwork, who would find it appealing and who would potentially purchase that artwork? Now, obviously, there are different definitions of what is, if I think about art history and some of the great artists and that there's some kind of spectrum between, okay, is it sellable and is it great art? But I'm not a museum curator. And I'm just going to put that out there. I am not interested necessarily in finding the next Rembrandt or de Kooning, to the extent that I want to be able to build their reputation and have them last through the ages. That's not my job. I love that. I love going to museums and I love seeing that work. And certainly it informs, some of the aesthetic interests that I have and that my collectors have. But at the end of the day, I'm looking for artwork that I find intriguing and interesting and engaging, and that I hope my collectors will as well. I'll kind of let art history sort itself out. So when it comes to this question, is digital art fine art? I think just the mere act of asking that question, to my mind, proves that it probably will be the next big thing. I mean, that's always the question, right? Is Impressionism fine art? And there was a fierce debate about that, and the Academy rejected it. And it became the fine art of that age. Is abstract expressionism fine art? Paint splatters on a canvas. No, it's not art. It can't be art. And sure enough, and so I think that we're having this conversation right now about unique new media that are available to us. We're just beginning to explore that, and I'm very interested to see where it's going and how artists will use those media and technologies to create the next great art that's going to be coming out. And so if you're interested in doing it, absolutely, I would encourage you to pursue it. Now, the second part of that question was, now what about how I'm finishing it and presenting it and I ship it rolled up and then they would need to frame it, mat it? There are some opportunities there. Some buyers do want to be involved in that process, and it allows you to sell your artwork potentially at a lower price point, right? Because you don't have those overheads and expenses in creating it. However, I do find that there is a large portion of the art market out there that is not interested in any extra work. I hear questions about framing and presentation and worries about what format is better, or this or that. Ultimately, my collectors who come into the gallery, most of them want to see a piece of artwork on the wall or on a pedestal, pull out a credit card, buy it, take it home, display it, enjoy it, love it, without any, with the minimal amount of friction between those processes. It's very rare that we have artwork that ends up needing to be reframed or reformatted in some way. Maybe one or two times a year out of the hundreds and hundreds, really thousands of pieces of artwork that we're selling, do we have anyone want to make changes to the format. And so with that in mind, my preference is to present it to them in that way. And I would say, Laura, that it would be worth experimenting for you. Let's stretch some up or mat them and frame them and have them ready to go and offer those on your website and social media, and see if that doesn't kind of simplify the buying process for your collectors and encourage them to make a purchase. I would suspect that it would. Framed, ready to hang is a great way to promote the work. And I suspect you'll find less resistance. What they're thinking when they're seeing it is, okay, where do I go to get it framed? How do I choose a frame? And any of those kinds of kind of obstacles in the way of the purchase process, or even considerations, can create friction in the purchase process. And I want to eliminate that as much as possible. And so I would encourage you to experiment with it. I think I've got time for one more question here. I'm not quite going to get to all of them, but we've covered a lot of territory today. Aaron from Carbondale, Colorado says, my recent quandary is that I heard, as I head out into other, hold on, sorry, I'm going to start all over again. My brain did not catch on to this question. My recent quandary is that as I head out into other galleries, maybe that take a 50-50 split, I was told by all of them that I had to raise my prices. In doing so, I believe I will outprice my current sales locations. I'm also concerned about pricing commissions and if that state is less than the new gallery rates. This might have been typed on a phone with some auto-correcting going on, I suspect. In order to be a working artist, I need things to sell, but this new pricing concerns me as sales are lower. Appreciate advice. This kind of is a continuation on the conversation we had in last week's session. Oops. Where we were talking about pricing, and I mentioned that the pricing you select for your artwork, it's not so much a factor of it being right or wrong as it is it being a choice that you're making. And that you are thereby choosing the venues that are going to be appropriate for showing and selling your work. And Erin, you are pointing to exactly this kind of choice where you've presented the work to galleries and the galleries are telling you, we like the work. We think it needs to be at a higher price point. We think the value is higher than this. We need to be able to maximize the display space in our gallery to generate revenue, basically. And so we would need to see your price point higher. And Erin, you're seeing the kind of decision that's going to have to be made. Do I want to proceed forward to show with those galleries in the hopes that I can increase my total sales when I know that by raising my prices, I'm going to be potentially eliminating my current market that I'm selling into? And usually that would be local buyers and existing collectors. I will tell you a couple of things. One is that you're obviously looking for galleries because you're not satisfied with the current market that you're in. And to me, that tells me that a change needs to be made. And two, you're sometimes presenting yourself with a false choice where you're saying, if I raise prices, my sales are going to slow down. I found that not to be the case for many artists, that there's a natural fear that we have that, well, supply and demand, if I raise my prices, I'm going to decrease the demand for my work and sales will slow down, when often actually the opposite is true, that it can be more difficult to find buyers, the right buyers at lower price points than it is at more aggressive prices in venues that are going to attract buyers who are accustomed to those prices. And again, from my experience in the marketplace, we should chase the buyers we want, not feel trapped by the buyers that we have. And that the effort that we're going to put into creating the work and promoting and selling the work is going to be better maximized by going after those buyers that we want. And could there be a transition phase where we see a dip in sales? Yeah, it could happen, and it could take some time to get established. But in the long run, you've got to think, where am I going to be spending my time over the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Do I want to keep spending it chasing after people who are arguing with me that the $300 I'm trying to charge for this painting is too much? And they want it for $200, or do I want to be chasing after buyers for whom a $3,000 purchase or $30,000 purchase is just the norm? And I would argue that we're all better served by aspiring to the best market that we can find for our work and by pushing forward. Thank you for your questions. We have actually run a little over time, and we're going to call it a day here. I did not get to all of your questions, but know that we have these Ask Me Anything sessions in the online critique group every third Wednesday of the month, so you can get your questions in next time that I didn't get to today. In the Art Business Academy, we have Q&A every Friday, so just throw a little promo out there. I do still have a few spaces in the Art Business Academy for those of you who are interested in pursuing galleries. It's at artbusinessacademy.net. But otherwise, we're going to look forward to being back here next Wednesday. We'll do a review of an artist's work and talk some more about the art business. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, wonderful week. We'll be back here next